Let's see. Okay, thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here, and my guest is John W. Whitehead. He is the author of Battlefield America, The War on the American People. He is the director of the Rutherford Institute, the author of many excellent books there. Check out their website as well, rutherford.org. John, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, sir.
John, your book seems like by conventional wisdom, it would be far-fetched, but in this day and age, not only with the fact that we are undergoing a pandemic, but the response to the pandemic makes your book not only plausible, but even likely in the coming months or even weeks. I think even as recently as a month ago, nobody would have in their wildest dreams have thought that businesses would be ordered to shut down, that we wouldn't be allowed to even go out and mow our lawns or visit a neighbor, that we wouldn't, people would be picked up and ticketed for walking along a beach or in a public park, or dragged off of a bus because they didn't have a mask on. And again, we could talk about what are the appropriate measures in a pandemic, and it is a real disease. But nevertheless, putting aside the pandemic itself, I'm concerned about some of the people in government and their agendas as they respond to the pandemic. So what say you, and how do you tie this into your very interesting book?
Well, when I originally wrote the book, I called it Sci-Fi with Footnotes, in which basically I saw what was coming because I've been working in this area for 40 years in constitutional law. I'm a constitutional law professor. I've sued in and out of Washington, D.C., which, by the way, I think is one of the most corrupt places I've ever operated in, by the way, because of what I've seen in Washington, D.C., working with a number of groups and former intelligence agents who talked to me about it. But yes, I think that we have to be very careful with what's coming out of Washington, D.C., but even more so as we move toward a global government, which we are moving in that direction, unfortunately, and we already got foots in that place. By the way, we're going to see some more of this. But what we're seeing now, in my opinion, is the psychological reconstruction of society by people getting used to being paranoid about one another, being submitting to ridiculous things. Like in one place now, they're saying that you have to, if you go to your mailbox, you have to go put on pants to walk out and get them, or you can be arrested.
I saw that, yeah.
But it's ridiculous. And you have a case now that we're weighing in on in Maryland where a young guy was killed at 4:30 a.m. in the morning by a SWAT team in his bed, basically by a mistake. They shouldn't have been there. His parents want to protest this with a number of other people. The prosecutors threatened them with $5,000 fine or 1 year in jail if they do it. So this is just a small group. They said they'd keep their distance 6 feet away. So there's some really heavy-handed tactics coming out of the government now, and a lot of it's not evidence-based. I've seen doctors, some really credible doctors, saying a lot of what we're seeing is not evidence-based. It's just government thinking. And the problem is that a lot of people in government are just average folks. They're not talking about geniuses. You're including judges who are making up rules. And to be honest with you, a lot of them don't know what they're doing, in my opinion. And the problem is, though, we have a Constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights is just getting smashed now, especially the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. The surveillance state is going bananas now. It's going to be amazing. They're trying to do away with cash, basically, and force it into a digital government, and where they'll watch everything. So when we come out of this, we're not going to be better. No, I'm not talking about a lot of people get biased, which I think is awful. But the thing is how the government's reacting to this, and you have to wonder if our government are supposed to be really good entities and all that. Why aren't they just mildly prepared for something like this? And obviously, they're so unprepared that what we're seeing is kind of crazy. But the problem is, coming out of this, will we really survive this in terms of our constitutional rights? And how will future people think about this, especially young people today? Are they going to be indoctrinated into a sense of, we have to submit no matter what? And if you do that, you might as well say that we're moved into what I talk about in my book, Battlefield America, a pre-Nazi state.
Well, I mean, I think that you're right in that younger people who don't have the understanding of the nature of freedom and the Constitution, the longer this thing goes on, the more they might be conditioned for such a state. I would note optimistically, I suppose, in this crisis, that the more conservative states, the so-called red states, the states with Republican governors, and I even include my own state of Massachusetts in that, are much more moderate in their enforcement of these sorts of rules, whereas the more left states, the so-called blue states, are the ones who are doing these really draconian and very questionable measures, both constitutionally and practically. That is it really necessary to do these things? And I also am very pleased, and I'm happy that Donald Trump is president right now, because he's really tried to balance the emergency with maintaining states' powers and states' rights, and not going into too heavily a national declaration of emergency only in select situations. And I think it shows why elections matter, because if we had Hillary Clinton as president now, or a liberal leftist, we'd be under martial law. I think at this point we would have, de Blasio of New York has already said we should nationalize entire sections of our industry and manufacturing. We'd probably have concentration camps for people who are not complying with, social distancing, or who have been tested positive or whatnot. So, we still have a system in place. And I think that maybe there's even some positive news coming out of this, in that people are more self-sufficient. They're homeschooling. They're more, it's a localism, which is an important concept. People now appreciate more the necessity of national borders and national sovereignty as a positive institution.
Yeah, localism is really, really key. What I'm telling people, and what I argue in my books and my articles, people should go to Rutherford.org, Rutherford.org, and read the articles that we post. They're all documented, by the way. Mm-hmm. Localism is the key here under the 10th Amendment. Local governments can tell the federal government to back off if they're going too far. And I'm telling, listen, people, the average American watches 150 hours of screen devices a month. I'm telling people to back off of the screen devices, get down to your local city council meetings, flood them if you have to. You're going to be a little bit radical. Why not? The people who wrote our Bill of Rights were considered extremists and radicals, and some even said they were terrorists. And take over your local governments and stop some of this crazy stuff that we're seeing. But listen, we've been taking so much stuff for years. There's 80,000 SWAT team raids occurring across America on an annual basis, up from several thousand in the 1980s. 80% of those SWAT team raids are from mere warrant service, where policemen used to show up at your door and just knock on the door. Now they're crashing through the door in the middle of the night and killing people, killing up to 500 dogs a day. Kids are getting shot. And we've been putting up with it. But here's the other thing. The mainstream media is not covering any of this.
No, the mainstream media seems to be compromised.
Oh, yes. I agree with that. James Madison said it best, the guy who put together the final draft of our Bill of Rights. He said, we ought to mistrust all those in power to a certain degree. And when you start trusting people, especially politicians in power, be very, very careful, folks, because the government uses behavioral psychologists. Obama came out and said it. He said he used behavioral psychologists to nudge the public forward. In other words, they're programming us. And do you want to become a programmed unit? And here's the other key. Right. If you like your grandchildren, if you love your grandchildren, you love your children, start teaching them the Bill of Rights at home, because in the public schools, they're not learning the Bill of Rights. They don't even read the Declaration of Independence anymore.
That's right. You can't even find it.
Down.
No, you can't even find a copy of the Constitution in school. And maybe, again, this is perhaps a silver lining to the pandemic, in that younger people, and even, I say this with liberals and conservatives, they by necessity are homeschooling and realizing the value of that. And people are becoming closer as families, and they're doing more together, and they're realizing old-fashioned values and like self-sufficiency and whatnot. So, in a way, this could be backfiring against the police state, and the growth of a nationalized police force with all of the new technologies that are very scary. And you've documented this very well in past books and articles, how, the use of drones as small as a hummingbird and other technologies are coming down the pike.
Oh, and, already on this pandemic, police across the country using drones to watch people right now. Bunch of articles out there on that, yeah.
But the more they watch us, the more we're becoming aware, hopefully, of the dangers that we're facing as independent people. And, your book is really a clarion call in that way.
Listen, I think there's a minority of people in the country that are waking up slowly. And homeschooling is a good idea. In fact, I won the first homeschooling case in 1979, the Peter and Ruth Noble case, when nobody would defend them. Father got arrested at night. I went to Michigan and defended him and won the case. And that started the homeschool movement, by the way, in terms of being a legal thing. So I've been involved in that a long time. Yeah, they're not, again, the public schools don't want rebels. And rebels, again, I like the idea of, some people say, I sound like a rabble or a rebel or whatever. And I go, well, that's great. People said Thomas Jefferson was a rebel. You go down the line there. And, again.
Exactly. It's a great tradition.
I identify with those people. Yeah, that's good. And that's what we need. We need more people who don't say no to the government and say, we're not going to do this if it violates our rights. Finding and trying to put someone in jail, parents, after police kill a guy in bed mistakenly, they want to protest, that is ridiculous. And people should be up in arms across the country over that. And all the other stuff we're seeing. And I see the reason why people are saying, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore. And we got to stop taking it, and we've done it too long. Here's the only thing I'm worried about. If this thing's over, I don't want people to sink back in their seats and start watching the mainstream media and going, oh, yeah, they're giving us the knowledge and all this and that. Because if you read Carl Bernstein's stuff, Bernstein and Woodward, who did the Nixon stuff, Carl Bernstein's written a number of articles where he said that the CIA actually vets articles for the major newspapers and the major media, and they watch it and they help control it. So the news you're getting is basically government filtered information. So be very trustful.
No, I think that's very good advice. And if you take a look at the mainstream three networks, it's a lot of panic and atrocity propaganda at its worst. And I'm not saying there isn't a real problem. I mean, I'm not going outside and running around anytime soon either until the disease lessens. But there seems to be this drumbeat that this thing is going to go on as long as they want it to go on. They're downplaying the fact that cases are dropping. They're discrediting legitimate and appropriate drugs like hydroxychloroquine that is actually saving people and helping people. I think for that, the thing against that is because it's cheap. It's been around for a long time, and the drug companies want to make a buck off this. Oh, yeah. And hydroxychloroquine, you can get that as a prescription for $20 for a 3-month supply. So they don't want that. They want to have these new modalities that are going to cash in, and they're going to raise the cost of Medicare and of healthcare for all of us, and they can make a ton of money. I'm sorry, but that's an opinion of mine. I can't prove that, but it doesn't look right.
The pharmaceutical industry has been is heavily involved in the government. And the Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook works intimately with the federal government. Bezos from Amazon,
sure.
Eric Schmidt, Google.
Anthony Fauci.
And they're working with the Chinese government, setting up their surveillance state. So we're moving into a total surveillance state with getting rid of cash, the war on cash, and going toward digital currency. Everything you buy and everything you do is going to be watched. And if you make a mistake, again, 80,000 SWAT team raids up from several thousand 1980s annually in this country, they're going to be coming through your door in the middle of the night, smashing it down. You know what? The courts are saying it's okay, unfortunately.
Well, they've already made examples of people like, I don't know, Roger Stone, this elderly man who had committed a process crime, is showing up at his door with 20 guys in ninja suits with machine guns, breaking the door down, knocking his wall in to arrest him. And
Yes.
then you have CNN there in advance on the lawn filming it all. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, and then he's held up as a put, they're going to put him in prison for 10 years. I mean, this is the kind, and that of course people are cheering because they've been conditioned to hate Trump. So, oh yeah, he's part of the Trump crowd. We should have him tried and incarcerated and set an example. So we already see the conditioning of it. And those brown shirts that were part of the Mueller group, another one that was like pulling people out of their beds at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, in 1993, they were seen. They said it was Wednesday when it was Thursday. They get these stipulated process crimes. I mean, that as an attorney, how that works. And so yes, I think that we are being set up to be conditioned for that kind of intrusion. And you mentioned China. They've got the technology, and Google is completely in bed with them. They've gone along with this big time. They're setting up a system by which every single person gets a social credit score.
We already have that, by the way. People don't realize the Department of Homeland Security is doing threat assessments on every home. They go from green to red, depending on your criminal history and if you own a weapon, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
When the police come to your door doing a SWAT team raid, if you have a weapon, they're agitated. And that's what happened to that guy I just talked about in Maryland. They thought he had a weapon. They shot him in his bed. Morning. But see, that's the threat assessment. Supposedly he had a weapon, and for that now. So this is, and you use the word condition. We're being conditioned to live in a total society of control. But here's the key: as long as they can keep you distracted from your devices, you're watching all the time. And I see kids today. All they do is stare at their cell phone all the time. That cell phone information, folks. Again, we ought to mistrust all those in power," said Madison. "Don't trust everything they're feeding to you."
Yeah, and then you have this guy shot dead in his bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they got the media launching in with their propaganda, as you say, probably vetted by the CIA, that is saying, "Oh, he was, a right wing, and he was, evil, and he didn't like black people," or whatever it is that they decide to pin on him. So everyone just sort of shrugs their shoulders and it feels like, okay, he got what he deserved. Better him than me. Yeah, it's kind of like in the Nazi idea where they would break down the door of a Jew and they would take the family away, but then they'd condition the public through propaganda and through the media to think, no, these people are not your friends. They're alien. They're, evil. They're whatever. And so people become desensitized to the fact that human beings have lost their right to be free and to function and to control their own lives.
And the key thing that they're taking away from us is what I call empathy. I mean, it's the idea of caring about other people and trying to protect other people's rights. What they're doing now, and this pandemic is a good measure, it's conditioning people to separate and look at everybody with suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly. I mean, when I go out occasionally, I notice that people. I'm walking around. People used to smile and stuff. Now they look at you out of the corner of your eye. Do you have?
Oh yeah. Even this morning, I was at the supermarket and a guy kind of cussed me out because I was standing apparently a little too close to him. I didn't even, it's sort of like people are upset, and it's not. I don't take it personally, but people have been agitated by this drumbeat of fear. Now, I think that you can take precautions, and I was wearing a mask, but let's kind of work within reasonable parameters here, and then let's keep an eye on when the reduction of this virus takes place, and it is taking place.
Yes, and again, some credible doctors come out and say a lot of this is not evidence-based and all that. Like they're saying, you can only have 10 people in some places, and they have to be 6 feet apart if you're going as a group. But the question is, why can't you have 11? Why can't you have 12? See, you see what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. So a lot of it's not evidence-based. It's just, listen, the people in power want you to be controlled. They want your money. They want to overtax you, which they do on a continual basis, and take your property. And I see that all the time, too, with asset. If you haven't studied an asset forfeiture, study that. The police are putting any cash in your car. They're taking it, and they won't give it back, even though you're not doing anything wrong. They're taking people's homes, their cars. And that's happening across the United States without any outcry from the populace. But then again, the mainstream media doesn't cover these issues.
Oh, forfeiture is a big subject, and it kind of seemed to have waned for a couple of years there, but now it seems to be coming back in big time. And then you have like the old the idea is that the states, as Franklin Roosevelt said, are laboratories of democracy. That they have a certain degree of sovereignty and that they can try different ideas. So we have Georgia, for example. The governor there wants to loosen up some of these restrictions, allow people within reason to go into businesses so the state doesn't go bankrupt. And he's being vilified in the worst possible terms. And, here in Massachusetts, I hear people making comments, oh, he's a Southerner, and this kind of stuff. I mean, right? I mean, it's all this kind of, nasty, divisive attack. And,
Hey, the founding fathers were Southerners. Get over it.
That's right. I mean, of course. I mean, the thing is, it's appropriate in his state, and he's the governor, he's elected. These scientists are not elected to decide whether or not measures can be taken to loosen things up and then to examine it and to do so carefully, which he's doing. So, what do we expect? I mean, and they're upset about people going out and protesting, and the media, just shows only people really like congregating when that's not really what's happening. People are going out and protesting, and they're maintaining a separation, and they're being careful, yes. But they're expressing themselves, and they're pushing their governments to gradually start to reopen, because if they don't do that, they'll never reopen.
Yeah, and again, the way the government views today, by the way, is mainly where cattle to be herded. I mean, I see that everywhere, and I've actually heard that term used by government officials. We need to herd them, move them on. And that's the idea of government today is they want to control us. But here's the key, and remember this, and that's why I'm telling people, teach your kids the Bill of Rights at home. By the way, you go to our website, we have a Bill of Rights pamphlet, a Bill of Rights card you can get to teach your kids. The whole idea is that you have rights. They're there. There are rights, and the Constitution starts with those three words: "We the people." What's that mean? We're the government. The people in Washington D.C. and the guy in the state or your local government. He's your servant. You are the government. So come on, folks, get involved in your government on a local basis and push this stuff back.
Exactly. I mean, the rights of the government are limited, and they come from the sovereign citizen under God, not the other way around. Yeah. So, we have to expect our elected officials. We have
natural rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Constitution recognizes natural rights. Exactly. That's the whole philosophical idea of this republic.
Right to life. We're born with our rights. They're inherent.
Exactly.
Self-evident truths is what Thomas Jefferson says in the Declaration of Independence.
That's right. Self-evident as opposed to created by a fiat state who decides who gets rights. That's what the whole American Revolution was about. Yes. To throw off that fiat power by a monarch and an aristocracy that simply made it up as they went. They decided on whim. They give favors or punishments depending upon who, they were into. I mean, we have intricate laws that protect us from that in this country that have been built up over centuries. And, it's very, very troubling to see a lot of that being thrown away now under the guise of a quote unquote emergency.
Also, after 9/11, U.S. Patriot Act was passed. Well, a little over a month. Obviously, it was written before 9/11. Over a 400-page bill, which basically gave the government ultimate power to come into your bank, national security letters, and get all your information. The bank can't tell you. They can go in your home and do download stuff off your computer and not tell you. All that was erected after 9/11. So all these so-called crises, the government will erect legislation and stuff like that. They even further their powers. So watch, that's coming down the pike too. That's right. And,
it's almost as if the Constitution has been suspended. I mean, that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, that's why I call it suspending the Constitution, one of my commentaries. Yeah, they're wanting, they don't want constitutions. What they want is control of the people. They want you to consume. They want your money. And that's basically what... And again, I've been out of Washington, D.C. for 40 years, seeing how they think, and that's the way they think.
All right. John Whitehead is my guest. The book, John, is Battlefield America, and it's available at Amazon.com. The website is the Rutherford Institute. What a cool website this is. It has all the headlines of articles you need to get up on in terms of what's going on with our rights and how they're being infringed. And that is the Rutherford Institute, rutherford.org. John, let my listeners just again know where they can get information. And I really appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, go to rutherford.org, rutherford.org. Again, there's a lot of information there. It's all carefully footnoted. And here's the key. Education precedes action. Get educated, get out there and kick butt for freedom.
All right. All right, John. Thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
All right.